we penetrate the world of American TV daytime talk shows, the final frontier where every taboo is unleashed. Here, Americans get to air their dirty laundry in front of 17 million caring people. Everything is unzipped and regurgitated onto your TV screens. This is The Fall of Rome, brought to you from this tiny, humble television studio in Chicago. Here's Jerry Springer!
Politics is my religion. It's not my only, I'm Jewish, but I mean, it's like a religion to me. I am the father of the destruction of Western civilization. I have done that. But frankly...
The admission right here on HuffPost Live from Mr. Jerry
around for
Springer.
a couple of thousand years. I think we got to give Eastern civilization a shot. You know, we've done it. Well, yeah, I'm proud of my show. Why wouldn't I be? Well, I apologize. I've ruined the culture. I just hope hell isn't that hot, because I burn real easy. I'm very light complected.
I'm very lucky. You know, I happen to make my living in front of a lot of people, and people treat me beautifully, and I get paid handsomely, and you know, I've been lucky enough to have a #1 show in America. I mean, gosh, this is a gift from God. This is a gift from God.
Let's stop the hypocrisy and just be honest about what the media does, what its role is. Liberals in the end will always win. You can fight your conservative views, but a younger generation, I can even go to the most conservative neighborhoods in Britain. You give me your most conservative neighborhoods and find me the people your age, and I am telling you they are more liberal than their parents. You listen to the same music, go to the same movies. From time to time, you probably even smoke weed. You know what I mean? Who are we kidding? Give all the conservative speeches you want. You know you're more liberal. Your sexual lives are more liberal. Your attitude toward gays is more liberal. Your attitudes on race is more liberal. We're a liberal country. I can go into the most conservative neighborhood in America, the most conservative. And if I can talk to the kids are watching the same movies, listening to the same music, living the same lifestyles. So everything that the liberals ultimately beat the conservatives on in time will become mainstream, and you won't even consider it liberal anymore. So I'm making America kosher, one pig at a time.
One pig at a time! One pig at a time, you can't respect! One pig at a time, the West will fall! Cherry, 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 one pig at a time! One pig at a time! One pig at a time! The West will fall! Cherry, 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 cherry. One pig at a time. One pig at a time. One pig at a time. One pig at a time.
So I'm making America kosher, one pig at a time.
As Jerry Springer states in his own words, I've been everything that you can't respect. A lawyer, a politician, a journalist, and a talk show host. Despite this fact, Jerry Springer exists as a global cultural phenomenon whose influence was amplified into the lives and minds of an entire generation. It seems to me that Jerry Springer is emblematic of our society's failure to recognize that the human spirit is fueled by great ideals and symbols. It is critical that communities provide ambitious and noble role models and inspirational stories to our society in order to encourage people to dream big and find the courage needed to face life's many obstacles. Instead, what we have done is feed degenerate and unaccomplished role models to our society, and then watched as people internalized the banality they consumed. The World Economic Forum and others who are salivating at the bit to implement a totalitarian Great Reset have repeatedly stated that the need for totalitarian government is predicated on the fact that Western ideals and democracies have reached their breaking points, as if the establishment and its subordinate media hadn't worked tirelessly for decades to feed this decline. For those that do not know, The Jerry Springer Show was a widely published syndicated tabloid talk show that aired between the years of 1991 and 2018. Over the course of its 5,000 episode run, the show emerged as a truly era-defining cultural phenomenon, averaging 8 million viewers per episode at its late 90s peak. Originally, the show served as a platform for mature political and social discussion, but was quickly retooled as its early seasons failed in the ratings. In 1994, the show debuted with a new focus on the controversial and provocative topics for which it would later become known. Under this new and wildly popular format, the show quickly devolved into a theater of undignified absurdities, with Springer playing the role of circus ringmaster. His disadvantaged guests were encouraged to brawl, strip, and otherwise debase themselves for public amusement. When the spectacle proved to be insufficiently lurid, actors were hired to provide sufficient clowns for their circus, performing absurd storylines contrived to be as degrading and salacious as possible. From incest, bestiality, transgenderism, mother-daughter dominatrix duos, to familial fistfights, nothing was off limits, as Springer presided over scenes that would have seemed unthinkable to a television audience only a decade prior. For his part, Springer framed the spectacle as being motivated by a journalistic and even democratic desire to shed light on the lives of real Americans, and perfunctorily ending every show with a moralizing sermon, before signing off with the phrase, "Take care of yourselves and each other." Conservative voices repeatedly denounced the show, expressing concerns of its possible deleterious effects on American society and public morals, but they were powerless to stop the pop cultural behemoth, as Springer was aggressively foisted upon the American masses by a media establishment seemingly committed to promoting him. The producers, of course, retort that they are simply providing the salacious and profane at the public's apparent insistence, as demonstrated by the ratings and popular public interest. And while there is some truth to that, I see The Jerry Springer Show as just another case of ideological subversion meant to weaken and undermine the American spirit. Culturally, everything that is degenerate has been systematically supported and iconified, and everything that is inherently valuable or represents the conquering human spirit has been either hidden or ignored. Ask anyone to name a popular artist, and they will most likely say Andy Warhol. Never Bogro, and not simply due to the impossible pronunciation of his name. Ask anyone who the most talented musician is, and they will likely reply with Taylor Swift or Slash. Ask them to name the greatest novel ever written, and they will likely say Twilight or Harry Potter. True world-class talent and achievement is often intimidating and confusing to the ignorant masses. Yet nevertheless, it is culturally necessary that great human achievement be amplified and proudly presented to the population as an inspirational testament to the mountains that people can climb when we push harder and dream bigger. I believe Springer, not unlike Andy Warhol or Taylor Swift, have been supported by the cultural establishment, and they engineered their popular ascents not for financial gain or a desire to entertain the American public, but rather for ideological subversion, and in this case they saw The Jerry Springer Show as a useful means of fulfilling its aims. I believe the goal of this particular project was to weaken American society by undermining its moral and cultural foundations. This would be accomplished through elevating and amplifying society's lowest elements, thereby inducing the targeted audience into imitating their attitudes and behaviors. It is customary for any given culture to elevate and celebrate its highest cultural representatives to the forefront of the cultural sphere. This is done in order to establish healthy civilizational role models, ensuring that the society's prevailing attitudes and behaviors are molded to serve its best interests. Correspondingly, healthy cultures will work to suppress negative role models, a kind of cultural quarantine that limits the mimetic spread of unproductive or destructive habits. However, when hostile outside elements are able to seize control of a society's cultural apparatus, This process can be inverted for the opposite effect through selective amplification of a culture's most degenerate members. By employing this strategy, Jerry Springer was able to tear at the fabric of the American society, fostering vice, sickness, and despair in the American populace. Moreover, moral taboos exist in healthy societies to guide individuals in proper conduct and to help ensure the preservation of the social order. Violation of these prohibitions was in traditional cultures taken so seriously as to be held to provoke the wrath of the gods, a religious metaphor for the dire societal consequences of contravening socially beneficial norms. Springer's televised magnification of America's sins and transgressions constituted a repeat ritual violation of its sacred taboos, a systematic defilement of the moral order. Put simply, the Jerry Springer Show was both a mass humiliation ritual and a mass psychological experiment designed to impair Western culture through inundating it with transgressive and demoralizing images. When exposed to these images, most people will respond in one of a few predictable ways. Some impressionable individuals, children for example, will slowly begin to manifest the behaviors displayed upon the screen, imitating consciously or unconsciously the images presented before them. The destructive social consequences of this phenomenon should be obvious in light of the people and storylines, both real and fictional, typically featured on Springer's show. Others, resistant to this mimetic process, will become demoralized and will begin to progressively detach themselves from the surrounding culture, leading to a nihilistic indifference towards its fate and a sense that they have no stake in its future. Concluding that the only winning move is not to play, these individuals willingly surrender the public sphere to their enemies. This state of disillusionment often leads such people into self-imposed exile as social recluses as they retreat into the escapism of a private world. In other cases, they seek refuge in the codified surrender of ideologies like libertarianism, as they search desperately for a coping mechanism that will allow them to moralize and rationalize for their own capitulation to the degradation of society. Others, still unable to process the subconscious trauma inflicted by exposure to these images, will lash out irrationally at themselves or the society around them. This often manifests in self-destructive behaviors such as drugs and alcohol abuse, self-harm, and suicide. In other cases, it emerges in hatred of general society and sometimes ending in destructive acts of physical violence, as in the growing epidemic of school and workplace shootings that roughly coincided with the rise of Jerry Springer and the trash TV genre, which are obvious manifestations of misdirected rage and social resentment. More frequently, however, this trauma presents as an unnatural enthusiasm for harm done against one's own people and society. A schadenfreude driven by the sense that this harm is a deserved punishment. This attitude was epitomized by the American comedian George Carlin, who specifically referenced the Jerry Springer Show in this context, and who frequently and poetically poked at the suffering and despair visited upon his fellow Americans, seeing it as a form of comic retribution for their stupidity. As an extension of what appears to be a cultural Marxist social deconstruction program, republished for mass public consumption, the Jerry Springer Show helped to realize the Frankfurt School's stated mission to make the West so corrupt that it stinks. The social consequences of this campaign included the normalization of unproductive and destructive attitudes and behaviors, the continued breakdown of the family and the institution of marriage, the further degradation of sexual norms and standards, the erosion of social trust, the fractionalization of social cohesion, and consequent social atomization, the loss of a sense of meaning and purpose in American life, and the disillusionment of personal and national pride. The accumulated weight of this ideological refuse would be sufficient to crush the American spirit, acting as part of a cultural process that produced a once proud people formerly known the world over for their resilience, optimism, and wholesome charm, into a nation of sickly, enervated nihilists. But how was Springer and the forces that engineered his popular ascent able to effect this transformation? Perhaps the world of literature may provide us with some insight. In Hans Christian Andersen's 1844 fairy tale, The Snow Queen. The devil crafts a mirror that distorts the image of everything reflected upon its surface, hiding all goodness and beauty while magnifying all of the evil and ugliness. The devil tells people that with this miraculous new invention, one can finally see the world as it really is. Believing this lie, the people traveled far and wide with the mirror until everyone and everything has been distorted in its reflection. The world of modern media, of which Springer's show was only a microcosm, is like this devil's mirror, pretending to show us the world and ourselves as they truly are, but distorting our perceptions to poison both. And the longer we gaze into this trick mirror, the more its distortions begin to manifest as reality in the world and in us, so that we become products of the will of its creators, now only able to see through the lens they have crafted, so that we will act in accord with their designs. Media thus becomes not only a means of controlling attitudes, behaviors, and outcomes, but of defining our very self-image. And as this subliminal weaponry corrodes the self-esteem of the unwitting spectators, they become masochistic, unconsciously mediating their induced self-hatred through the humiliation and destruction of symbols that represent them. And so as Springer's audience, both in America and across the Western world, watch the depravity unfold, they learn to cheer and laugh at the debasement of their own society, reveling in the spectacle of its decay and death. What would have once inspired disgust now elicited laughter, and what would have once angered now entertained as the theater of American decline became a national pastime. Meanwhile, Springer, through framing himself as a compassionate observer and arbiter in this theater rather than the active instigator and facilitator that he in fact was, effectively distanced himself from the depravity over which he presided, transferring the guilt that should have been laid at his feet onto his guests, and by extension onto Americans themselves. In other words, the consciously crafted subliminal implications of Springer's show is that America and its people are disgraceful and evil. This ritual exposition of debauchery was the real purpose of the Jerry Springer Show, and it was used to mark all of America as guilty for the vices of Springer's hand-picked guests and paid actors. But what, when they ask, motivated this animus against America and Western society, there is no need to spell it out. If you are watching this video, you likely already know. For all those, Springer serves as a particularly egregious example of the engineered demolition of Western society. He was not in any sense unique. For decades, the controlled media has carefully curated stories and images, only deeming that which is socially and culturally destructive to be fit for public consumption. This most fundamentally is why modern media, from art to popular entertainment, is so relentlessly demoralizing and so completely void of any higher values or aesthetic beauty. Any story or image that could serve to strengthen, ennoble, or dignify are suppressed, lest it rouse the will to life and power in its audience. This stranglehold ensures that the captive Western mind is deprived of transcendence, dispossessed of the stories that imbue life with meaning, and robbed of the positive role models that alone can inspire men to overcome and excel. Relentlessly besieged by devitalizing images, our people feel left without recourse, and most cannot even envision a means of escape from their psychic prison. If there is an outpouring of grief when the media follows the death of an influential public figure, it is usually because the individual in question has contributed in some meaningful way to the degradation of Western society. In Springer's case, his death elicited this same artificial outpouring because he was an agent of cultural subversion who made waging war on Western ideals and their civilization his life's work. This is his true legacy.